Don't eat the ants. That was the first thing we were told. It was a bad infestation. Me and my buddy Mark were there to treat the place. We'd been working for our exterminator company since high school, 3 years. Looking back, it should have been obvious not to eat the ants, but not to Mark. Mark was the kind of guy that would drink a rotten carton of milk for $5. And if no one anteed up, he wouldn't be too mad. He liked the attention. Standing in the doorway, the guy who owned the place stared us both down. He repeated his instruction. Don't eat the ants. He was a pale kid, kinda sweaty, thick glasses, a little bit of a nerd. He said it in a real serious way too. Like he was a doctor on one of those cheesy hospital shows where everyone's banging each other. He stared at us again, long and hard. Then he left us to do our thing. It was a mess inside. Ants literally everywhere. On the walls, on the floor. Everything was carpeted in ants. You couldn't walk without hearing a crunching noise. Like leaves in autumn, there was a weird smell too, but it wasn't a bad smell. It was almost good. Sugary. Like cookies from the oven. I was dusting chemical around the edges of the room when I heard Mark call me from the bedroom. Yo, you gotta see this. I took my time. Mark had once been impressed by a bowl of Kraft mac and cheese that I had added bacon bits to. He called it fine dining. Whatever he was looking at, it could wait till I was finished, dude. Seriously. Come on. It's not like last time. I sighed and finished up my wall. I went to see what the hell he wanted to show me. He was right. It was gross eggs. Ant eggs stacked about a foot high off the ground in the corner of the bedroom. It looked like a pile of quinoa. Worker ants were growing the stash, adding one egg at a time around the edges. On top of it all was the biggest, fattest queen ant I had ever seen in my life. Must have been the size of my thumb. I could hear it clicking it. The cookie smell was extra strong there. I shuddered. Let's bug bomb it. Later. Dare me to eat an egg? I looked at Mark. He shrugged. Eggs ain't ants. You dumbass. $12. This is stupid. $10. 5. Mark grinned and took a humongous egg from the stack. He sniffed it and grinned. Kinda smells good. Suddenly, he yelled and waved his hand around. The queen ant had somehow latched itself onto his finger. He shook it off and shoved his hurt thumb into his mouth, sucking off the blood. He stamped the queen ant into a stain on the ground. He probably would have spit on it too if his thumb wasn't in the way. You can still back out. I folded my arms. Fucking shut up. Mark composed himself and made a big show of holding the egg over his gaping jaw. I swear, I saw the little white bean pulse and wriggle around like something was moving inside it. I almost told Mark to stop, but he needed to learn that his actions had consequences, so I kept quiet. Mark held the egg above him for a solid 5 seconds, then let it drop into his gullet. He grimaced, swallowed it whole, and stuck out his tongue. All done, you're disgusting. Mark laughed. Where's my $5? You spent it last week when I covered your Wendy's. You still owe me $3. Mark got mad and tried to wrestle me to the ground. I got him into a headlock and he stopped struggling. We finished up the job, dropped 2 bug bombs, one to do the job, the second for luck, and left our number in case they had any more problems. In the car, I caught a whiff of sugar as Mark entered on the passenger side. The next time I saw Mark was on Monday. I hadn't heard from him in 3 days, but that was just Mark. He liked to get shit-faced on the weekends and go to Dave & Buster's. He called it his me time. I was knocking on his door at 7 a.m. to pick him up for work. He was late, which was normal for Mark. It took him almost 15 minutes to answer the door. When he opened it, I did a double take. He did not look good. Mark usually had a hangover Monday morning, but this was especially bad. He was pale like a ghost, sweating all over, and had dark circles under his eyes so thick they looked drawn on with marker. He held his stomach like it was causing him pain. It was kind of bulging out like a pregnant lady just starting to show, and the smell. BO and beer mostly, but there was something else too, sugar, not sure I can work today. Mark leaned against the doorframe. I told him not to worry about it. Mark had tried to cut work before, but those performances were paltry compared to this. I told him to get some rest and to text me when he felt better. At the time, I had completely forgotten about the egg. I thought this was just Mark being Mark. I feel bad about it now. At the end of the week I got another call from Mark. He needed some help with a bug issue at his place since he was too sick to take care of it himself. I was starting to worry about the guy. On the way over, I bought chicken soup and Pepto-Bismol from Walmart. Mark loved their chicken soup. He said it reminded him of his mom's. Mark couldn't even answer the door when I arrived. I had to let myself in with a doormat key. The sweet smell was stronger than last time. Like breathing in pure sugar water. I had to put my shirt over my nose to get used to it. I went into the bedroom. Mark was laying down on his bed, holding his stomach and groaning. It definitely had bulged out another inch. His entire body was covered in a layer of clear, syrupy liquid that was getting into his clothes and sheets. He had some sores on his neck and arms that looked like burst pimples. They looked red and infected. The sweet smell was so strong next to him, I had to breathe through my mouth. I tried to give him the chicken soup and Bismol, but he just made a face. Not hungry, you sure you don't want a doctor? Just shut up and take care of the ants. Mark pointed at the wall. Leading up to his window, there was a double line of ants that wound down to the floor and disappeared into a crack in the baseboard. There was another line leading from the door to his room to underneath his desk, and a third line emanating from a hole in the ceiling that led down to the window again. Mark didn't live in the nicest part of town, but this was weird. He had never had ants before. I set up some traps, sprayed some chemical, and told Mark I'd be back to check on him. That night, Mark called me twice. Once at 1 a.m. and again at 2 a.m. I slept through both calls. When I got up later, I saw the notifications. Still groggy, I put the phone up to my ear and listened. The first call was Mark groaning that he wanted to go to the 24-hour clinic, but he needed me to drive him because he didn't want to pay for an Uber. Good old Mark. I started to fall asleep again as I pressed play on the second voicemail. A few seconds in, and I was wide awake. Mark was screaming. It was a horrible sound, all garbled like he was underwater. He was yelling that his skin was crawling, that everything burned. He kept saying, "I'm ants. I'm ants." I heard something that sounded like 1,000 sheets of paper crinkling, and the message cut off. I ran to my car and sped over to his apartment. It was quiet when I got there. I didn't hear screaming from behind the door. Just a strange rustling, like sand pouring. I unlocked the door with the doormat key, and opened it slow and steady. Ants everywhere. It was worse than the place we had treated. There wasn't a single surface that wasn't covered in a tidal wave of ants. The walls, the counters. They even ran across the ceiling, falling down like crusty raindrops. And the smell. So sweet. Like melted powdered sugar mixed with boiling maple syrup. I stepped inside cautiously, feeling the crunch of ant bodies beneath my feet. Where had they all come from? Mark. I made my way to the bedroom, brushing fallen ants from my shoulders and trying to keep them from crawling up my shoe and into my pants. I got to the doorway and looked inside. I almost threw up. Mark was laying twisted on his bed. His arms and legs were arranged in odd angles, like he had been writhing around and suddenly frozen. His jaw was slack and he was staring up at the ceiling with blank eyes. His skin was covered in a honey-like substance, thick and dripping. His body was torn in places with long ragged gashes, blood soaking into the mattress. His ribs and organs were exposed, cold, purple, and twitching, but that wasn't the worst part. I knew where the ants came from now. I watched ants burst out of his skin, tearing through the layers of his body to get to the surface. They emerged from his insides in organized double lines. They were all over him, working, cutting out tunnels and carrying bits of his intestines in their jaws. They crawled through gaps in his eyes, his nose, his ears, anywhere there was a hole. It was like looking at an ant farm, except instead of dirt it was flesh. Everywhere on him was filled with furrows and bunched up areas filled to the brim with ants. I moved my eyes to his stomach. It was ripped open like a plastic shopping bag. What was in the center made my heart stop: eggs. Piled a foot high, at its top was another humongous queen ant. I stared at Mark's body for a long time. It took a while for me to believe it was real. But, just as I was coming to terms with it, I had a weird thought. The sweet smell wasn't as strong anymore. Now it was almost delicious. I breathed in deep. It made my stomach gurgle. I hadn't eaten breakfast. I was hungry. Those eggs, they glistened with Mark's juices, and my mouth started watering. I wondered what they tasted like. I stepped forward into the room and slowly reached for the pile. Something on the wall shifted and got my attention. A chaotic pile of ants slowly organized itself. It slowly formed shapes, then letters, then words. Those words spelled out a single message: don't eat the ants. Love, Mark. I woke up from whatever the smell was doing to me. I plugged my nose and ran out. Ants fell all over me as I went. One or two slipped into my mouth. They tasted like my grandma's sugar cookies. I almost swallowed. I spit them out forcefully and scraped off the gritty body parts that remained with my fingers. I got out the door, shaking my clothes, and doing a stupid dance to make sure no ants stayed on me. It wasn't enough. I stripped down to my underwear and burned my clothes in a nearby trash can. Naked and hiding in my car, I called the police. I never stopped plugging my nose. I had to convince the operator that I wasn't a prank caller. Eventually, the police came and took care of the whole thing. Another exterminator company came in and got rid of the ants. I wanted to quit my job, but couldn't. I wasn't exactly qualified for anything else and I had bills to pay. I got over it after a while. Lots of bugs to kill other than ants. Things went back to normal, kind of. My ant traps have been filling up kind of quick recently. Went through 2 boxes in a week. Might just be the weather though. It's getting cold, and sometimes I think I smell that sweet scent in my apartment. But it never lasts too long. I do breathe nice and deep when it happens. It's comforting, and I did notice last night a line of ants coming in through my bedroom window. Double file, they looked tasty. I'm sure it's nothing.